Hello, 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 everyone, and welcome to yet another episode of Power of Positivity. I almost forgot the name of my own show. Wonder how that happens. Anyways, I have another wonderful, wonderful guest with me. Say hi to everyone, Dre.
Hi guys, I'm Dre Harrison. You might also know me as Harrison101. I've spent far too much time dedicated to myself on the internet to keep track of at this point. But you may know me from the Motorsport 101 podcast. You may know me from the difficult second chapter of WTF1. And yeah, I'm just a classic run-of-the-mill motorsport blogger with a mouth too big to control, basically. And it's kind of got me into this mess, but it works out. It works out all right.
Yeah, having to put up with people like this. Horrible.
This is the easy part. Don't worry about that. It's the actual people in motorsport that I've got a problem with most of the time. But we soldier on. I'm joking about that bit. Don't worry.
Yeah, I know, I know. Um, I'm, while I'm preparing this interview, am I preparing basically going through a couple of your stuff, not much to be honest. I
Oh,
was
thanks. I'm glad you prepared for it properly. That's good. It's good to know going into this.
I don't know if I ever told you how I found you, like at all.
No, never have.
But I was looking for footage of F1 2011 when that was new,
Oh yeah.
and I think you're like on part three of your career mode. So
That that would make sense if it was 2011. That's the only series I was properly doing back then, so that would probably make sense. You caught me in my really early YouTube days.
and what was your motivation to start? Like what? Yeah, this is what I want to do. I want to do internet content. I want to do YouTube. What motivated you to do that?
Um, you've probably heard this story like 10 times before because it was just that period of the internet. I mean, YouTube was still pretty embryonic, even by 2010, 2011. People had only just started figuring out like how they could potentially monetize this thing. And for me, it was never about the money. It was I was subscribed to a bunch of like older gamers like who had bought like a Hopwatch HD PVR and they bought some sort of capture device to record their videos from. Like Hutch. Like I talked to a lot of Call of Duty YouTubers like Hutch and Mr. Sark and Cnanners and people like that. And I thought that was like a really fun thing to do, and I always thought that I could do something like that. Like it was a weird time for me because I was still trying to figure out what I wanted to do on YouTube because people think I started YouTube in like 2011 with F1 stuff. I actually started making videos in 2008. Like
Oh
this is
God.
like this is like really like year three of YouTube as a site. Oh, and I was doing like video blogs for like. Well, I'll be real with you, man. I was bullied in school a lot, and I used making videos as an escape, as like an outlet from that. And people really liked them, and people wanted like shout outs when the school figured out that like, my school I was in figured out that they actually really thought I was quite cute and thought it was charming that I was on YouTube and just making video blogs about things. And so it was like 3 years of doing school blogs and then transitioning into other things like playing Pokemon online for a little bit and just generally just trying to figure out what I wanted to do. And then one birthday when I was 18, it was my 18th birthday. I asked my family for an 18th birthday present to get a Hopwatch HD PVR. That was the big black and blue brick that was the go-to capture device for games back then. And I got one, and the first game I ever tried out in it was F1 2010 by Codemasters, the first proper F1 game that Codemasters developed for the Xbox 360 and PS3 era. And I did one video of it, put it online, and it just kind of stuck with me. I enjoyed doing it, and I kept making more and more videos about it, just basic editing, and it eventually grew into doing career modes for 2011, and that's kind of really how I got my start on YouTube. Like, the first proper, like, case of subscribers rolling in. I was like, oh, okay, this is actually catching on with people. And that kind of got me back into F1 as a sport, and that became my thing for many, many years. I want to say 2011 up till about 2017, I was just doing nothing but pretty much. Okay, I was mixing up with a bit of a few other games, like a bit of FIFA here and there, and like the MotoGP games when Milestone picked up the rights to that in 2013. But that was my thing. I was just a motorsport YouTuber, and that's the first thing that really got me into this game properly, was that. So, yeah, a lot of that tracks, but it took a lot of experimentation and years of grinding before I got to the point where I was like, okay, this might actually work out for something.
Do you have a favorite playthrough of yours on the internet of any game? I have one of mine, I gotta admit, but I'll say it after you say it.
Okay. The first MotoGP game, 2013, was something I enjoyed a lot. F1 2013, where I started putting a bit more effort into the videos and started doing like skit sequences and telling stories a little bit more during the career, was a lot of fun. But the one that's always resonated in most of me was playing Race Driver Grid and completing that Let's Play. It's still for me one of the best arcade racing games of the 2000s era. I've played through it like 5 or 6 times now in my life because it's just such a fun game. The car collecting, the handling model was fun. The amount of disciplines, the building up your own team. It was basically a modern day Tokka. And I loved it, and I that's the series that I was juggling that while being in the middle of a university degree. I was often using my school's Wi-Fi to upload it because like university Wi-Fi is the best, let me tell you. But that is the one where I was really starting to hit my groove as a YouTuber and making content and making regular video blogs, and that was the series I had the most amount of fun doing. So I would say Grid personally.
You'll never believe it, that's actually my favorite one as well.
And it's funny, I've had a few people tell me that Grid was their favorite, and I'm like, sometimes the obvious answer is the right one, because it just is. Like anyone that's ever asked me about my time on YouTube, the Let's Play that stands out most to me has always been Grid. That was always one of my favorites. So, yeah, like it's like I'm really glad that for a lot of other people it was their favorite too, because it certainly was mine. It's the one I had the most fun doing and putting together. So yeah, for me, I'm glad that you saw what I saw in that. Definitely.
Although the first skit you did for the F1 2013 career mode lives free in my mind for some reason. No idea what.
It's probably the idea of me doing push-ups. Like that's a scary. That's a thought that still scares me 10 years later. Yeah, that was when I was just. I was like, I just did. By that point, there was a proper F1 YouTuber community growing by then. Like people that many people still watch now, like Arav and TM at Marduk, back in those days, and I didn't want to just do what everybody else was doing. I had a digital camera. I wasn't afraid to use it. I wanted to be creative with it. And just push the envelope a little bit. And it sounds stupid now because obviously YouTubers have evolved and video editing has evolved so much beyond that in the 10 years since then. But back then, just having a training montage in a let's play for an F1 video game was seen as innovative. I still remember when Valdudes did one F1 2013 career mode race. And he did this incredibly advanced trick of, and you won't believe this, using the replay function. And that
Amazing.
blew everybody out of the water for 2013. And I think that made a lot of people realize we've been doing this shit all wrong. It's crazy. So yeah, I'm glad the idea of me doing physical exercise lives rent free in your head. I'm glad I can provide that for you.
Um. All right. What when did you think what made you this that's a bad way to put it. What motivated you to start going to more blog specific content, and then how did you get more into stuff like WTF1 and whatnot? Not mentioning how it ended up going, but how did those opportunities started coming along?
Oh, don't worry, man. Like nothing's off limits to me. I'm very honest about these things. By the time I got to like 2016, 2017, I had been making YouTube videos like it was a full-time job for about 5 years at that point. And this was still the period of YouTube where there was no real money in it. Like the total amount of ad revenue I'd made on my YouTube channel by then was like $100. Like so, and like obviously I'd done my university degree by then. Um, as you grow up as a person, it's like, well, okay, shit, what are you going to do now for the rest of your life? You know, and it took me 5 years to get my degree as well because I changed courses 2 years in. I went from a business studies degree to actual broadcast journalism, which is what my degree is actually in. So by the time I got to the end of my degree, and by the time we were in like F1 2016, 2017 kind of territory, I was just kind of fed up with YouTube. And like, I'm not going to lie to you, it was one night where I realized my channel was not growing anymore. And look, I openly admit this is a shortcoming from me. I got too wrapped up in the numbers. I really did. That was, if I could go back and do it again, I'd have realized just do it for fun, Dre, because I got wrapped up in the numbers. I'd seen some of my peers, like I said, I mentioned before, Arav, like TM at Marduk, the early days of Super GT, who's now doing brilliant work with Quadrant. Like, I saw the tea leaves and I saw the big players really start to come forward with F1 content creation. And I knew I was lagging behind. I knew I couldn't compete with those people. And I got too wrapped up into that and I had a mental breakdown. I remember one night I just sat at my desk. I broke down in tears and I was just like, I can't do this anymore. I was burnt out. I was exhausted and I just lost all motivation. So I sat down, man, with a good friend of mine, Adam Johnson. You might know him as AJ Omega now on YouTube. And we beat our heads together and was like, well, what can we do instead? And part of my university degree was doing a final year project. And for those who don't know, in the UK, you either have to do what the Americans will call a thesis at the end of your degree, normally a 10,000 word written piece.
Oh God.
Yeah, some people also call it a dissertation, depending on what part of the world you're in. In the UK, we call it a dissertation. I think the Americans call it a thesis. So it's either a 10,000 word, ridiculously long, like backed study of some degree of subject in your field, or do some sort of media-based project. Everybody in my group took the media-based project, and my attitude was I'd always wanted to do a podcast because I thought that was a much more natural format for me because most people who know me know I'm a pretty natural talker. And I don't think YouTube was ready for like podcasts at that point in time. So I did a podcast. I got another very good friend of mine, Ryan Eric King, together. We used a cheap, pirated MP3 Skype recorder to record a Skype call that we had. We turned it into a podcast, and we did 10 episodes of it as part of a university project. I got a very good friend of mine called Stephanie Hunter, to build a website around it, upload the 10 episodes, and people liked it so much they were like, Dre, do more of them. And then when the YouTube stuff dried up, it was just a natural transition. It was just like, why don't we just do the podcast full time? And that's how Motorsport 101 started. It was just, I've joked about it on many occasions. One of my go-to phrases that Motorsport 101 really was a university project that just got out of hand. And that's exactly how it is now, 520 episodes later. So, like, we're coming up towards 10 years of that now. Like, it's our 10th anniversary in October, which is just wild to me that the podcast has been around that long.
Christ.
Yeah, so basically it was 6 years or so, or not six, about 7 or 8 years of just juggling that, occasionally doing videos, but mostly just podcasts and writing, because I love to write. I used to write about football. I used to write about video games. So again, easy transition for me to just to start writing stuff and just reviewing races, reviewing old races, reviewing content, and just trying to be funny and just trying to not take it so seriously while also still trying to have some degree of seriousness about motorsport topics in general. And just taking a blog site, having it host podcasts, and having written content. And next thing you know, it's basically a network at that point. Us bringing in a couple of extra people like RJ O'Connell, who's been a fantastic co-host, Cam Buckley, and so many brilliant co-hosts that have gone on to brilliant things themselves. Lewis Sotheby and Bike Live, who you may now know as MotoGP's color commentator on their broadcast on the world feed. Katie Fairman, who would go on to be a member of WTF1 herself. A lot of people have passed through our doors that have gone on to do professional work. So it's an incredible honor to be able to have that platform. And it was up until 2022, the end of 2022, when I was about to pack it in. Again, I was just thinking, is this it? Is this as far as we're going? This is not like the podcast isn't getting that huge amount of numbers. It was getting about 500-600 plays an episode, but it wasn't growing enough. And I was just sitting there going, well, is this it? Are we like? So I was sitting there contemplating packing it in because I was juggling that with a full-time job working in a betting shop. I was a manager in a bookies for 6 years. And then it was Andrew Vanderbilt from the race who emailed me one day to say, Dre, there might be an opening at WTF1 and we want you. And I'm like, you what? It's like, so people have gone out of their way to listen to me at the race. I'm like, shit, okay. So of course we have some emails and some back and forth conversations. We work a little bit on Photoshop. I put together a pitch video as to why they should hire me. And in January, they hire me. And I end up doing a year at WTF1. So it was a lot of sadness, a lot of gladness, a lot of transitioning, a lot of, again, just trying to figure out what sticks and what doesn't. But after years of thinking this was just going to be a hobby, it actually parlayed me or made me transition in towards actual professional paid work, which is something that I never thought was actually going to happen. I was just about to give up on that being a possibility. And then all of a sudden, I'm replacing Matt Gallagher on WTF1. How the hell did that happen?
Well, you tell me. But I know I was really happy when that got announced. Like, you deserved that break.
Thank you, man. That's really kind of you to say. I've never claimed to own a large pocket of the internet space. There are so many people I can call friends that have taken themselves to astronomical levels in this industry and beyond. You watched my early work, my man, and I said to people years ago on YouTube that the dream would be that 10, 15, 20 of us are in an F1 paddock one day, or that we all can get full-time professional work in this industry. And now I can say 10 years on, a lot of us did. Arav did, Ben did, Super GT did. The rise of Jimmy Broadbent's been incredible to watch. Literally, Sim Racer in a shed is now actually taking part in actual motorsport, owns a team, owns a brand, all, taking himself to incredible levels. And not in a million years did I ever think I'd end up being a WTF1 presenter. I thought this was it. I thought this was the big break. So the fact that all along the right people did eventually go on to watch me is an honor. And I'm so glad. Look, I don't claim to, like I said, I don't have a huge following. I don't. Even to this day, I still don't have a massive amount of people following. I'm not one of these internet celebrities per se. But the pocket of people that I know enjoy me and enjoy the content that I'm a part of, love it. And that's more than enough for me. That's all the motivation I need to keep going. But the fact I'm actually now able to do it professionally is wild. And it's something that I never ever take for granted, ever.
Do you have a favorite episode of your podcast?
Oh God, there's a few.
You left and you're just like, yeah, that was just connected.
Oh God, there's a few where that really just. I mean, we just did our 500th episode the other day, and we went through what we thought were the 50 greatest moments in our show's history, and it was a fun time, like just putting all that together and just looking back at some of our finest moments. If it's hard to pick out just one where I just go, this is brilliant. There's a handful, like the jokes about the Shag, Marry, Kill segment with Ayrton Senna back in the early days was hilarious. I think that was episode 68, 69. Nice. Unironically. The episodes where it was the four of us, where it was me, King, RJ, and Cam, was such a golden period. We had so much fun together recording those episodes. The first Motorsport 101 draft, where we just drafted our own dream teams of drivers, I thought was incredibly cool. I'd love to do that again at some point down the road. I think that would be fantastic. The other ones like Fernando Alonso getting bumped in 2019 from the Indy 500, where we get Chris DeHardy on it, who covers IndyCar for Front Stretch, and just breaking down and in tears and floods of laughter just how badly McLaren screwed up that 500 week. How bad that they got the measurements wrong. The fact that the car was the wrong color. The Zach Brown having to go find the steering wheel and then getting bumped by Kyle Kaiser of all people in a Juncos. That until about a week ago, that was a feel good story, but that was a hilarious episode that I still remember to this day. Getting Ryan Nanny from SB Nation as a guest was incredibly cool. As just an incredibly funny guy, and being able to explain F1 to a relative novice was way more fun than I'd ever give it credit for. And as an alternate, the Bike Live episodes I did with Lewis were incredible. Like, Lewis was my I joke. I called him my radio husband because we just got along so well and we clicked so brilliantly on Bike Live. The 92 episodes I did with him were incredible. And we interviewed multiple world champions on that show. Like, the Nicky Hayden one will always stand out to me the most, because sadly no longer with us. I've told this story before, but I feel like I owe it to you guys to say it here as well. This is when Nicky was towards the end of his career in World Superbikes, when he was racing with Honda, and we were like, the World Superbike paddock is very accessible. Like you talk to their press officer, chances are they'll give you a phone number. And we got Nicky Hayden's mobile number, and we agreed to like an interview 7 a.m. Texas time, because obviously he still lives in Kentucky, over in Texas, so 6 hours behind. We thought the time difference was 5 hours when we called him. So we're an hour early for the interview because it's -6 in Texas.
Oh boy.
So we accidentally woke up Nicky Hayden early for his interview. They were like, "Hello, who's speaking?" And I'm like, "Oh, it's Lewis Sotheby from Bike Live, where we had an interview with you." I was like, "Oh, we realized." Then we just realized, "Oh shit, we're an hour early." And Nicky, being such a good sport, was like, "I'm awake now. It's fine. Let's just do the interview. It's fine." And such a lovely man, funny, hilarious, honest, always smiling, warm personality, and being able to just chop it up for 20 minutes with a man who I watched and admired greatly from the background, and was able to actually just talk to him on a level about bikes, about bike racing, about he just got on his first World Superbike win at Sepang as well. So it was a wonderful interview. It's probably my all-time favorite interview I've had with someone in motorsport, and that will always have a place in my heart. And sadly, no longer with us. And it's one that always sticks out with me. So there's a few great M101 moments overall that I have to hold. I couldn't give you just one, Miggy. I could. There's too many. That'd be like choosing between my kids if I had to choose one.
Wait, you have kids?
Just no, joking, not like joking. That, but metaphorically. Yeah.
Do you remember how you got into Formula One, or how you just mentioned MotoGP?
Yeah. It was a classic case of my dad. My dad was a huge sports fan. He was the sort of in my household. My mum did all the heavy lifting. Did all like getting the kids ready, going to school. Going to all the parents' evenings, making sure that you were studying, doing your homework. My dad didn't do a lot of that stuff, but the stuff that me and Dad bonded over was sports. It was always sports. It was Manchester United Football Club. It was Michael Schumacher in Formula One. We're talking like late 90s here. He just moved over to Ferrari. And Ferrari were just starting to figure it out around like 98, 99 kind of time, where he was a contender. And I fell in love with Ferrari from reading about him in a book with pictures in it. I was like, the Ferraris are so cool. So naturally, when Ferrari's in F1, you root for the big shiny scarlet red Ferrari because you're 6 years old and you don't know any better. So there was just me, 6-year-old Dre, sat on my dad's lap, watching football, watching Formula One. Same with MotoGP. My dad was a huge Valentino Rossi fan.
Most people were.
It was the early 2000s. Like Valentino Rossi was the shot in the arm that made MotoGP more popular than World Superbikes again.
And that Galois livery was so good.
Oh, of course, yeah, man. Like the Galicia livery, and then the Repsol when he was briefly with Honda, and then the Galosi's when he went to Yamaha in 2004. Yeah, my dad was a huge Valentino fan. So naturally, he raised me and my younger brother Ryan into the sports fanatics we are now. So yeah, that's mostly how I got into it. I think that applies for a lot of people, that they had a parent that was into their sport, and that's how you spent time with them growing up. So yeah, Formula One, MotoGP. Formula One was a little bit. Took a bit longer for me to get into F1 properly, but MotoGP was my first love. I loved, like, from 2000 onwards. Like, I was hooked. Like, I grew up a huge Kenny Roberts fan. I wasn't a Valley fan like my dad was. I was a Kenny Roberts Jr. guy when he was at Suzuki. until he was kind of fading away, and then I became a huge Gibernau fan. Seti Gibernau when he was at Honda, and then I was kind of neutral after he kind of his body kind of fell apart until Marc Marquez came along, and what a phenom he is now. But that's how I got into F1 and MotoGP. It was a lot to do with my dad and just growing up as a youngster in a house in West London. That's just how it was.
I was the first thing that came to my mind while you talked about Juggernaut was like, wait, was it 2004, 2005 that him and Rossi, Rossi collided into him in the last corner? Ahead is
Ref, yeah, it was a Ref 05. Yeah, it
05.
was.
I wasn't sure if it was
Yeah, yeah,
05
yeah,
or 04. I
yeah.
remember you talking about that, about watching that live at the time.
Yeah. God, you don't know how wild it was growing up in a house of MotoGP fans where my dad and my brother were both Valentino Rossi fans, and I supported Sete Gibernau because I thought the Telefonica movie star Honda livery was the coolest thing ever as a 12-year-old. So I rooted for Sete. And I just didn't like Valentino as a kid. I was one of the rare ones that was like, Valentino's a bit much. I think he's a bit of an egomaniac. I just didn't warm to him like a lot of people did. Um, and there was beef, but like it's wild how quickly that relationship deteriorated because a lot of people don't know this. Gibernau and Rossi were best friends growing up in MotoGP. They used to go on family holidays together. Like they were really, really close friends as Rossi was growing up until Gibernau became a title threat. Like around 2004, 2005, like after the whole broom sweeping incident in Qatar when Rossi was sent to the back of the grid for having his mechanic sweep his grid spot up after qualifying, I think Rossi thought that Gibernau had grassed him up or like stitched him up to the authorities on that, and Rossi never forgave him for that. I remember that's how her F05 happened from a personal standpoint, and I remember Rossi vowed that Gibernau would never win another race again, and he was right. That was the closest Gibernau ever got to winning another MotoGP race. He never won one again after that. After that punt at the final corner at Jerez. I mean, that was Valentino Rossi basically rewriting the rule book of what was okay in a bike race. Because we've seen that block pass now so many times in bike racing since then that doesn't get punished anymore now. Like, Rossi wrote that rule book on racecraft and the code of how to ride a MotoGP bike properly. So yeah, like it sitting there as a Gibernau fan at my house with Rossi winning that race after punting Gibernau into the grass on the final corner of the last lap, I was incensed. I was so angry. Like you don't even know. It was wild. It was a wild time, and that was one of the. The scary thing is now looking back on it. Gibernau's probably not even in the top 3 of Rossi's greatest rivals now because of now what we know with Max Biaggi and Jorge Lorenzo, Casey Stoner, and obviously now Marc Marquez towards the end of his career. Shit was wild, man.
Yeah, there's just too many people to choose on that department.
Mm.
Personally, I can't legally hate block passes because that's kind of how Oliveira ended up winning his first race. If you remember it.
Sorry, my sound cut out a little bit there. What was that again, mate?
Like I can't legally hate block passes myself because that kind of helped Oliveira win his first race in MotoGP. If you remember Styria 2020.
Yeah, yeah, gosh. And I know how big a deal that was for Portugal as well because they just, I know they've got a lot of bike fans over in that country, and I know that Miggy is their guy. So yeah, it's weird how these things play out sometimes, in that sense. But no, that totally tracks. That did clear the way for Miguel Oliveira's first win, and he's had a few of them now in MotoGP. It's funny how these things turn out.
Yeah, uh, I th- I still think people have no idea how big the reaction was over here. Like it was utterly insane.
Is he really that popular over in your country? Because I've been told,
Now not as much.
but like back then, I got the impression, or people were telling me from Portugal that he was like up there with like Bruno Fernandes in terms of like popularity of athlete in
Absolutely.
that country. Obviously, like Ronaldo's on a completely different tier of existence, obviously, but like Miggy, is it true that Miggy really was up there like that?
Look, the Grand Prix of Portugal that he won later that year, when he arrived at the country, he got an escort from fans, from biker
Wow,
fans.
wow.
That's I don't know if it was the year that he won or the year after. Now that I'm thinking, but he got a full on like biker group escort. I don't know if it was to the hotel or to the track, but something like that happened. Maybe I'll look up a link and send you afterwards.
Sure, man. Love to see that.
Um, but yeah, it was utterly insane. All right. This is supposed to be. Give me a second.
Yeah, take your time, man.
Right. I'm back.
Cool.
Uh, to circle this around to the what was actually about. Um, from your time in WTF1, is there something you think you could have done differently, or was it like inevitable what ended up happening? Or the things that ended up happening were pretty much inevitable?
Here's what I'll say. Do I think we were given as a team, because there was four of us on that second rebooted team, me, Charlie, Hannah, and Kieran? Do I think we were given the best chance to succeed? No. Do I think that even if everything had gone to plan, it would have worked out? Also, no. So, short answer is probably a bit of both. My actual answer is it's complicated in the sense of I knew when I signed the dotted line and I took that job that there was more than a 50% chance we were going to fail. I know how the internet works. WTF1 had over 1 million subscribers when I joined them. It was over 1.1 actually, if memory serves. And the audience had obviously had time to develop this relationship with Matt, Tommy, and Katie. And I always say Katie as well because she deserves a huge part of their success, and she doesn't get the flowers that Matt and Tommy does, in my opinion. They had, like, especially through the pandemic as well, they did a lot of live streams, they did a lot of activities to entertain their community. They had built up a huge bond with their close fans, and a lot of people thought that the race who owned them as a company fired them. This was never true. This was never the case. They mutually all agreed to part ways, and Matt and Tom wanted the creative liability to do their own thing elsewhere. They wanted to take a gamble and be their own bosses. And I universally respect that. Like, for many content creators, eventually you're going to have to make that choice. Do you want to gamble, be your own boss, have that full creative control, and do your thing? Or do you want to work under an umbrella? What I was going to say is that basically Matt, Tommy, and Katie had spent the last 2.5, 3.5, 4 years like building up their audience where they could probably go it alone with the audience that they built up and built up for themselves and not be dictated by a boss or be told to make stuff. Keeping all the money that you make and keeping that creative control, which I know for many people is everything to them. They built up an incredibly strong bond with their audience over as much as 12 years in some cases. So coming in to replace them, it felt like Mission Impossible. It felt like that there was no way I was going to be able to do that. I knew going in that there was a good chance that this was all going to fail. And then we were not given the best chance to succeed. We didn't really get much of an intro. We were bundled in to the goodbye video that Matt and Tommy had made. And then that was taken off YouTube because the bosses thought it was free promotion for their future channel, and it wasn't. So all the people that were hardcore fans of Matt and Tommy and thought that they were wrongly sacked rather than walk away off their own backs, they doubled down and they thought, well, they really have fired them because they've taken down the apology video. Or not the apology, sorry, the goodbye video, I should say. Because they took that video down, a bunch of their hardcore fans doubled down and thought, well, they've really got rid of him. And it made us look bad. Like, a lot of people just did not know who we were. And then we're doing Twitch streams and we're making videos, and they didn't even know that Matt and Tommy had left. Katie had left them about 3 weeks later as well, and we couldn't publicly say why. So our communication was dreadful. A lot of the subscribers of the channel just immediately unsubscribed and moved on and just waited for Matt and Tommy to launch P1. And I think people just stopped caring about us. And look, a part of me knew that was going to happen because I've always said this, and I continue to say it. People make brands, not the other way around. Like, people didn't watch Top Gear because of the fact it was Top Gear. People watched it because it was Jeremy Clarkson, Richard Hammond, and James May. The presenters were what made that show what it was, not the fact it was Top Gear. It's the same principle here. Like, we were never going to recapture the magic that they had left behind. Like, they had a very specific audience that they had grown and cultivated. You don't just replace the presenters and hope it's all going to work out. Now, I get why they did it. It was making too much money for them to just abandon it, so they had to try something. But even if everything had gone to plan, and everything had worked out how we would have liked it to have worked out, I don't think it would have mattered in the end. I really don't. Like, I was told what they were doing on the balance sheets, and they were losing money month on month.
Oh, God.
So I kind of, yeah. And I'm talking serious wedge. Like, and at that point, I knew we were doomed to fail, and they had to cut down on what they had. You know, if, like with any business, if you're losing money, you're going to look at your staff first, because staff's your biggest overhead, your biggest expense. You know, and with their website struggling and their podcast not getting the numbers that it used to get, I was the most expendable person. So they moved Charlie and Hannah into other parts of the race. Kieran had been let go months earlier, which was always a terrible decision, because I think he was an excellent presenter and writer and host, a versatile talent, and could have easily done it and been the face of what they wanted to do, but they cut him after 3 months, and I thought that was bullshit. So yeah, overall, like, I'm proud of the stuff that I was able to do for them. I think it was good content, personally. I think that Like if I said if it was all crap, I'd have just said it was crap, and I would have just walked away myself early because I just don't believe in making shit content for the sake of it. But I'm genuinely happy with the stuff that I wrote and put together for him. It's just, I think, you know what it is? If Matt Gallagher and Tom Benningham were voicing over the videos that I wrote for them, I
People
don't
would
think
love it.
anybody would have noticed the difference. People would have loved it, but because it was a voice they didn't recognize, and in our case, it was either Jack Nichols, former Formula E commentator, or Harry Benjamin, who now is doing F1 stuff every once in a while and used to do F3. Generic voices that people vaguely recognize from other motorsport series. If it was Matt and Tommy, they'd have been fine. I just think people were backing them as personalities that they just moved. They just moved when Matt and Tommy moved and when Katie moved, and that's understandable. I don't hold that against anybody. That's a part of the internet. You follow your favorites. That's what you do, and that's understandable as to why you do that. I'm just gutted that not enough people out there gave us a chance.
Yeah, understandable. Uh, what do you see yourself doing in the future?
That's the beauty of it, man. I just don't know. If you'd have said to me 5 years ago that I was 3 years away from working for one of the biggest Formula One YouTube channels in the world, I'd have called you crazy. I said you're on drugs. So it's hard to predict where things are at. I mean, for those who don't know, I now work for the Motorsport Network. I'm editing their podcast content and occasionally doing like voiceovers. There's other plans in the works as to what I'm going to do with them. Like I can't go into yet, but they're going to be pretty cool. I don't know. I'm now 31 years old. I'm not young anymore in this game. And the thing about media is it's constantly changing. Like the podcast has now become such a versatile platform for content now that we would never have guessed 10 years ago that the podcast would now be the thing that everybody now does. So, I can't say for sure what the future holds for me. I didn't think I would even get one crack in motorsport professionally, let alone two. So, it's hard for me to predict what's going to happen next. Whether it's going to be more pivot into video, whether it's going to be more presenting work, whether it's going to be me just hosting a podcast or whatever it is, can't say for sure. But it's been an unpredictable time, and I think that's part of what makes it fun. So I don't want to know what the future holds for me. I'm just going to try and enjoy the blessing that I'm still in this industry after being let go from WTF1. Because honestly, I spent 3 months unemployed after that. I thought that was it for me. I didn't think I was going to get a second chance. So the fact I have one is a blessing for me. I'm going to enjoy that blessing for as long as I can.
I hope that's a long time. Honestly, I think that's everything I wanted to ask from my end. So, anything you want? Oh,
Brilliant.
one more thing. One more quick thing.
Sure.
One of the things that seeing your content helped me with, especially your early stuff, is that like you, I also have what would used to be called Asperger's.
Yes.
I don't know if you remember talking
Mm-hmm.
about it. Um,
I
to
do.
anyone in the same boat as us, do you have any? But like, still figuring things out. Do you have any piece of advice that you can give?
Great question. Because I do remember talking about it. It was an early episode of Dre Talks. I mean, we don't really call it Asperger's anymore now because it turns out the doctor Asperger's that came up with it was not a great person. So
Yeah.
I think it's now more known as ASD, and I know a lot of people just put it under the general neurodiverse spectrum. But I remember talking about it years ago on an episode of Dre Talks when I was just talking about things that weren't motorsport related. Because I didn't know I had it really. I didn't have an official diagnosis until I was 17. And that's quite late for most people. And I think a part of that is just because when I was growing up in the, obviously mid to late 90s, we just didn't have the technology or the understanding of various mental health issues that we do now in 2024. Hence why we used to call it Asperger's, for example. So yeah, like I didn't know. Like I knew I was different from the time I was young. I knew that I was being pulled out of English and maths lessons to learn about things like eye contact, trying to keep conversations with people, my social skills, trying to make friends, in
That's
different
wild.
places. Yeah. So I knew there was something different about me from the time I was young, but I could never quite put my finger on what it was. I had speech and language therapy when I was a child because they thought that I wasn't talking like a normal child was in terms of, you know, compared to quote unquote normal in inverted commas because what is normal. But I didn't know until I was 17 when I got an official diagnosis about what this was. The best advice I can give to anybody is don't ever look at something like that as a weakness or as something that will hold you back from being able to do what you want to do. I'm not the smoothest of talkers. I still have some of those speech and language issues that a lot of people do. Sometimes I struggle to pronounce certain words, and sometimes I do slur my speech when I talk too quickly. And yet I've been a presenter in a whole bunch of different places. So it's never been easy for me. I'm not going to make any bones about that, but just don't look at yourself in the mirror and think you're a bad person, or if you think less of yourself because you might have some degree of neurodivergence. That, for me, is what makes you the person that you are. That's something to be celebrated, not to be looked at as a weakness or something that's a downside for anything. There is no shame in taking your time in figuring out what kind of person you are. So embrace it. Don't ever let it hold you back. Don't ever let it tell you or let your headspace tell you that you can't do something because of it. Because I'm walking proof that you can. I got to work in motorsport, something that I dreamed of when I was a teenager, and I eventually made it. It took me a long time to get there, but I got there. And I'm immensely proud of myself for doing that. And it's never in spite of my neurodivergence, it's because of it. And I take that as a badge of honor. So the best advice I can give to anybody out there that might be struggling to find themselves as a person or struggling to understand how their brain works is talk to people about it. There's always going to be someone out there that understands where you're coming from. Have empathy, have sincerity when it comes to these things. But don't ever knock yourself down or depreciate on yourself and your value as a human being because of the fact that your brain might be wired a little bit different from quote unquote the norm. Because what the fuck is the norm? It's I don't think that applies to how human beings operate, quite frankly. So just love yourself and embrace yourself for who you are, even if it's not what you think is like anybody else, because those flaws or what you might think of yourself as a flaw, it isn't a flaw. It's what makes you you, and that's unique, and that should be something that you should triumph and celebrate rather than look at as a downside. That's what I would tell myself if I was 17 again, and that's what I would tell anybody that might be struggling to deal with their neurodivergence or struggling to figure out where they fit in the world. I didn't fit. I worked out all right in the end. Trust me.
All right is an
People,
understatement.
I'll take it. I'll, I'll take it. It's not been easy. It's not been smooth, but I'd like to think I've done all right for myself. I had to make a lot of sacrifices. Had to, burn a couple of bridges. I've done some things I'm not proud of, but you know, overall, I'd like to think I've done more good than bad, and I'd like to think I'm in a decent place. And I'm very lucky to be in the position where I am.
Um, now that that was the last question. Thank thank you very much again for being here. Anyone who happens to be hearing this and heard it all the way, just love yourselves and have a good one. Any last words you want?
No, I just want to say thank you for having me, man. It always means a lot that someone wants to drill into my head a little bit more. I always appreciate the fact that somebody wants to hear me talk or wants to hear my perspective on certain things. And I know you've been following me for a long time, and I do really appreciate that. And shout out to all of you out there that's gone out of your way to listen to this. And just thank you for having me, man. It means a lot, and I'm glad. I hope this was as fun for you as it was for me.
Oh, it absolutely was. So have a good one, everyone, and see you all in the next episode. Bye.